Right. In this video, we want to look at electrolysis. Electrolysis is a big topic, so I'm going to make a number of videos to cover all the various aspects. Now, for this video, we want to know the meaning of electrolysis and electrolyte. We also want to know what happens in electrolysis and explain the movement of ions. Again, we want to know the meaning of oxidation and reduction and know the electrode at which oxidation and reduction occurs. That is the objective for this video. Now, for a start, I want you to describe what happens to the ions of an ionic compound when it dissolves in water. Could it conduct electricity? And if so, why? Pause the video, think about it, and write it down. Pause the video, think about it, and write it down. Now, this question can be explained in terms of the solid and an ionic compound that has been dissolved in water. Now, what happened is that we know that from our bonding, ionic compounds are made of ions, positive and negative ions being attracted to each other electrostatically. Now, so when ionic compounds are solid, the ions are held up in the bonding, so they are not free to move. However, once they dissolve in water, like this picture on the right here, the ions are free to move around, and therefore they are able to carry charges. And so when ionic compound dissolves in water, they are able to conduct electricity because the ions are free to move around and carry electric current. Now, remember that electricity is essentially the movement of electric current. Okay, so that is the answer to these questions. Now, what is an electrolyte? Now, remember that ionic compound contains ions, positive and negative ions being held together electrostatically. Now, when we dissolve an ionic compound in water, the ions are free to move. Now, so an electrolyte is an ionic compound that is molten or dissolves in water. In simple terms, an electrolyte is an ionic compound that is molten or dissolves in water. Molten or melt means it's melted. Okay. Now, if we take simple, a common ionic compound like sodium chloride, being an ionic compound to contain positive and negative ions. Now, if you take a solid sodium chloride and dissolves in water, you will get an electrolyte of sodium chloride. So an electrolyte is an ionic compound that is what dissolves in water. An ionic compound that it dissolves in water or is molten. Okay. Now, in an electrolyte, the ions or charged particles of the ionic compound can move freely, and so electrolyte can conduct electricity. Like I explained before, once the ionic compound dissolves in water, the ions over here you see in this picture, the ions are free and they can move around and can carry electric current and therefore can conduct electricity. So electrolyte conduct electricity. Remember, we are saying that electrolyte are ionic compound that is molten, in other words, melted or dissolves in water. And so an electrolyte can conduct electricity. Electrolyte can conduct electricity. Now, therefore, what is electrolysis? Electrolysis is a process in which energy transferred by DC decomposes an electrolyte. Okay, so what we do in electrolysis is that we break down an electrolyte by passing electricity through the electrolyte. Okay, now remember that an electrolyte is an ionic compound that is either molten or it dissolves in water. So once they are molten or dissolves in water, remember we said they can carry electricity. So in electrolysis, what we are trying to do is to split the electrolyte into its constituent ion by passing electricity through it. Now, the word lysis here is a Greek word which means to split. So in electrolysis, we split up an electrolyte into its constituent ion by passing electricity, okay, through it. Now, what happens in electrolysis is that you require two electrodes. Place the electrodes into the electrolyte and connect it to a DC supply. Okay, it requires two electrodes being placed into the electrolyte with a connection to a DC supply. It's as simple as that. You place two electrodes into the electrolyte and connect it to a DC. Now, one electrode is positively charged and is called anode, and another electrode is negatively charged and is called cathode. So in electrolysis, we place two electrodes into the electrolyte, connected to DC. One of the electrode is connected to the negative terminal of the DC, that is the negative electrode, and the other is connected to the positive terminal of the DC, and that's the positive electrode. Okay, the positive electrode is called the anode and the negative electrode is called the cathode. So over here you have the positive electrode here. This is the anode and this is the negative electrode. Okay, you can see from here. Now what happened is that in the electrolyte, remember when we dissolve an ionic compound in water, the ions are free to move. Again, remember that ionic compound contains positive and negative ions. Now, the positive ion is called cation, and the negative ion, like this one, is called anion. Now, we'll come back to this later on in the video, what happened to them. So, ionic compound consists of positive and negative ion. The positive ion is called cation, and the negative ion is called anion. Now, electrolysis, again, if I want to recap, is a process in which energy transferred by electricity or DC decomposes in order to break up an electrolyte. And to do that, you place two electrodes into the electrolyte and connect it to a DC. Now, one of the electrodes is positively charged and is called anode, and the other one is negatively charged and is called cathode. Again, ionic compound contains two ions, positive and negative. The positive ion is called cation and the negative ion is called anion. Now, we remember this using the acronym PANIC. Positive anode, negative is cathode. Okay, positive anode, negative is cathode. Okay, so the positive electrode is anode and the negative electrode is cathode. Right. Now, for example, if we take this, remember I said that the positive ion is cation and negative ion is anion. If you take an ionic compound, and so if you take a common sodium chloride, if you dissolve it in water, sodium chloride is made up of sodium chloride, sodium ion, and chloride ion. So the positive sodium ion is the cation, and the negative chloride ion is the anion. Another example is potassium fluoride. Potassium fluoride will consist of a cation of potassium 1 plus and anion of fluoride 1 minus. Okay, so that is cation and anion. Now, going back to our electrolysis, what happened during electrolysis? All right, what happened during electrolysis? Now, the general principle is that during electrolysis, the ions in the electrolyte are attracted oppositely charged ion. Okay, the ions in the electrolyte are attracted to oppositely charged electrode. Now, what this means is that remember we have two ions. We have cations and anions. Okay, we have cations and anions. The cation, which is the positive ion, are attracted to negative electrode, and the anion, which is the negative ion, are attracted to what? The positive electrode. The general principle is that the ions in the electrolyte are attracted to oppositely charged electrode. Positive ion will be attracted to negative electrode. Negative ion will be attracted to positive electrode. Now in this case, the positive ion, which is cation, will then go to what? The negative electrode, cathode, and the negative ion, which is anion, will be attracted to what? The positive electrode, which is anode. Okay, so over here, if you look at this picture here, we have positive ions here. Now you can see which electrode you are dealing with by the sign here. We have negative sign here, which means this is negative electrode, and therefore positive ions will attract to the negative electrode, and here negative ion was attracted to the positive electron. You know that by the sign here. Okay, again we use the acronym PANIC. Positive anode, negative is cathode. Positive ions goes to anode, negative ions go to cathode. Right, let's check what we've learned so far with this exercise. Now choose the correct answer. What is an ionic compound that is molten or dissolved in water? First questions. Next question, what is the name given to a process in which energy transferred by DC electricity decomposes electricity? Next, question 3, the positively charged electrode is called. Question 4, the negatively charged electrode is called. Question 5, cations are attracted to. And question 6, anions are attracted to. Pause the video and answer them. So in question 1, what is an ionic compound that is molten or dissolves in water? The correct answer we know from our definition will be what? An electrolyte. Okay. Question 2, what is the name given to a process in which energy transferred by DC decomposes electrolyte? From our definition, that will be what? Electrolysis. Again, question 3, the positively charged electrode is called anode, and the negatively charged electrode is called cathode. Yeah. Again, cations are attracted to cathode and anions are attracted to anode. Okay. Right. So that is it for this exercise. Let's go on. Now, let's look at oxidation and reduction as the last part of our learning objective for this video. What is oxidation and what is reduction, and what happened at the electrode, the various electrode, which electrode goes undertake oxidation and which one undertake reduction. Okay, now in terms of electrons, oxidation is loss of electrons and reduction is what? Gain of electrons. Oxidation is loss of electrons and reduction is gain of electrons. Now at the anode, anions loses electrons and are oxidized, and at the cathode, cations gains electrons and are reduced. Okay, so what we know is that at the anode, oxidation occurs, and at the cathode, reduction occurs. Now, we've already established that cations will move to cathode and anions will move to anode. Now, we know that anions are negative ions and therefore will move toward the positive electrode. And so you can see the negative ion being attracted to the positive electrode here. And over here, we have the cation, the positive ion, being attracted to what? The negative electrode. Okay. Now, once they get there, at the cathode here, the anions gain electron and are reduced. And once the anions come to the anode, they loses electron and they are oxidized. So what you have to know is that oxidation happens at the anode because the anion loses electron, and reduction happens at the cathode because the cation loses electron, gains electrons, so to speak. Now, we use this acronym here to remember what happened at the various electrodes. Oil rig. Oxidation is loss of electrons and reduction is gain of electrons. Okay. At the anode, the anion loses electron and are oxidized, and at the cathode, the cation gain electron and are reduced. In the next video, we will look at the various equations and the uses of electrolysis.